Uh, this one I'll keep for last. What do you think, as a way of getting out of this recession, of a redistribution of wealth? That's a question coming from the public. Actually from a German friend, from what I understand, by the name of Karl, so as to prop up demand by redistributing wealth from the high saving portions of the population to the high spending portions of the population.
Well, I think that, given the economic crisis, everybody is going to have to make sacrifices. And unfortunately, part of the sacrifices on the fiscal side has been that in addition to cutting government spending and provision of public services, there has been also a need to raise tax revenues. And that increase in tax revenues reduces disposable income and may also slow down further consumption. I would say that leaving aside the issue of course, fairness, and there has to be fairness because in many countries, as we know, there's been significant amounts of tax avoidance, if not outright tax evasion. Even from an economic point of view, it makes sense to make sure that if there is going to be some increase in the tax burden, and there has to be some increase in the tax burden, leaving aside the issue of fairness, that is done in a way that reduces the negative impact on aggregate demand. Now, traditionally, we know that those who have low income, those who have labor income, those that are wage earner, have a very large marginal propensity to spend, and they tend to have a lower marginal propensity to save. While those who have higher income, those who have capital income, those who have more wealth, and they are net creditor and savers rather than borrower and debtors, tend to have a lower marginal propensity to spend and a higher marginal propensity to consume. So I would say that part of the efficient and not just the fairness approach to trying to address the fiscal issue might have to do with some degree of taxation that reduces the overall burden on workers and increases the type of burden of those who can afford it the most. Of course, you have to be careful because if the degree of taxation, especially of the business sector, were to become excessive, then the risk is that there's going to be even less job hiring, even less business investment. So, for example, in France, I would say that there is a decision of the government to increase the marginal tax rate on highest income individuals to a level of 75%, probably something that is excessive and is going to be discouraging economic activity. I think going after tax evasion and tax avoidance is necessary, probably some form of direct or indirect taxation of some parts of wealth as a way of gradually over time reducing the burden of public debt should be a matter of public discussion. There are some pros about it, there are cons about it. I don't think it's black and white, but certainly the overall issue about the fairness of the economic adjustment is one that has to be on the table. If the sacrifices are not perceived as being socially fair, of course the backlash against the reforms and the austerity is going to be more severe than otherwise.
Excellent, thank you. I'm rushing, I'm kind of, bunching similar questions together, otherwise we'll never finish. One of the ways out, or one of the instruments we could use, you mentioned, could be a gradual, controlled depreciation of the euro. So the question we are being asked is, why do you think it is so strong at the moment? Myself, I tend to think, for instance, that the idea, that the choice by the Swiss central bank to peg the Swiss franc to the euro has propped up demand for the euro. Other colleagues believe that China is paying a lot of attention to increasing its share of official reserves in euro. What is your feeling in this?
Well, there are many reasons why the value of the euro is stronger than otherwise. And one of the paradoxes, actually, of the Eurozone is that whenever there is a risk of a breakup of the Eurozone and the crisis becomes worse, like in June and July, when the spreads on Italy and Spain were very high, the value of the euro was falling from 130 towards 120 or below. But as soon as then the ECB came with his program of trying to support the debt market for Italy and Spain, the value of the euro went back again towards 130. So the paradox is when things really get bad, the euro weakens, but whenever there is hope that things are actually going to improve, the euro becomes stronger. There's other factors that I think are important. One is that if you look at the United States, the US is running a very large current account deficit, and that is something that over time could weaken the dollar, while the Eurozone overall until now was running a trade balance, surplus in the core, deficit in the periphery, but right now the surplus of the core is remaining large while the deficit of the periphery is shrinking, and therefore the Eurozone is starting to run a current account surplus. That's beneficial for the euro. But I think that the key issue that determines exchange rates is actually monetary policy. The policy rates in the Eurozone today is 0.75. In the United States or in Japan or the UK is close to 0. I think that's one thing that matters. Secondly, in terms of quantitative easing, the United States is much more aggressive than the Eurozone in terms of quantitative easing. US did QE1, $1.8 trillion purchases of Treasury and RMBSs. It did QE2, another 600 billion. It did Operation Twist, another 600 billion. And now it's just announced another program of QE3 that is open-ended purchases of bonds until the labor market significantly improves on a consistent basis. So the US is going to keep on buying long-term bonds and print money for as far as the eye can see. The Eurozone instead has a policy by the ECB where quantitative easing has been extremely modest, where even the OMT has been announced but not yet implemented, and even the implementation of the OMT will be only for a few countries and only conditional on then this country following austerity and reforms. So if you're comparing relative interest rates or relative money supplies or relatively quantitative easing, other countries like United States, but even the UK or the Swiss or even the Japanese are more aggressive in terms of their quantitative easing than the European Central Bank. And unless the European Central Bank is going to realize that the recession is now spreading even the core of the Eurozone, and its monetary policy overall has to become more easy than it's been, then the value of the euro is not going to weaken. So in order to weaken the value of the euro, the European Central Bank has to follow a more easy, aggressive monetary policy. I think that's a necessary condition for the gradual weakening of the euro to happen.
Very